Hello there. What just happened in the Netherlands started as a tremor, but it ended up an earthquake and will blow the doors off of the European Union. This shows the strength of feeling in the Netherlands on issues like immigration. Geert Wilders and his Freedom Party, the PVV, were due to take about 26 seats of the 150-seat Dutch Parliament. But exit polls during the election yesterday show they look set to win 37 seats and become the largest party. That's more than double the number he got at the last election. "I had to pinch my arm," said Wilders. And it's reported that MPs and their political staff in the Dutch Parliament's press centre gasped and groaned as the results came in. Reminds you of the BBC and the UK political class as the EU referendum results came in, doesn't it? Always labelled as far right, the so-called Dutch Trump now has to try and cobble together a coalition of parties to form a government. He needs 76 seats to make a majority. That means joining together with other parties who have a total of 39 seats combined. But the big thing here is that Wilders wants a vote on a Netherlands exit from the EU, a Nexit. And he is also a very big critic of the religion of Islam. So it's no wonder that they banned him from the UK back in 2009 when he was due to attend the House of Lords, having been invited by two of its peers to give a showing of his film Fitna. Now the scale of his victory has surprised everyone, including his supporters and Mr. Wilders himself. But as he said, the people have spoken, and he intends to put them first once again. The largest party in the Netherlands, and I tell you, the voter has spoken. We are sick of it, and we are going to ensure that the Dutchman comes first again, he said, adding that we can't be ignored. Now I would guess it's going to take a lot of time and horse trading before Wilders gets his coalition together. And as a lot of what he wants appears to fly in the face of EU orthodoxy, then he might have to make a few concessions. He's already rode back on his previous policies regarding the banning of mosques and the Quran and replaced it with a pledge to be the Prime Minister for all Dutch people, whatever your faith, your background, whatever that is, regardless of your religion or origin. But the question that many will have is, will he shelve his Nexit plans to get a coalition together? But the one issue that might be uppermost in Dutch minds, and so be the one that Wilders cannot walk back on, is the issue of immigration, where Wilders has vowed to stop all immigration into the Netherlands. But where the EU Commission has a cunning plan of its own to deal with immigration and asylum seekers. A plan that is at odds with those of Wilders. A plan that forces member states to take 30,000 asylum seekers a year or be fined €20,000 for each one they don't take in, as well as having EU-wide rules for the control of external borders. Not only that, the EU Parliament has just voted to abolish member state vetoes in over 65 policy areas. Now this would be a real increase in the power of the EU over its member states, something that would require a massive change in the EU treaties to achieve. But a vote in the EU Parliament does not make this a done deal. Under the EU bicameral system, the EU Council of Ministers also has to vote in favour of it, but unanimously. The EU Parliament is not sovereign. And I can't see Wilders voting to give more of his nation's sovereignty away to Brussels. Can you? But it gets worse for Brussels. In 7 months' time, June 2024, the EU goes to the ballot box for the EU parliamentary elections. And if this strength of feeling is maintained in the Netherlands, we might see a lot of very Eurosceptic MEPs being delivered by the Dutch voters. And who knows what's likely to happen when you factor in other countries like Italy, France and Sweden. Another point to note is that the presidency of the EU Commission is basically a position appointed by the EU Council of Ministers, where the EU Parliament is expected to vote to accept whoever they are presented with. And Ursula von der Leyen's term ends at the same time as the EU Parliament elections next year. Now, the EU Commission is always trying to be the boss of Europe. But as far as I can tell, every year it just ends up a little bit more out of kilter with the people it governs. And who out there is impressed with von der Leyen's performance? So I think the next appointment to EU Commission presidency will be a very big call for the Eurocrats. I think they know that they need to get this one exactly right. Someone who can deal with the likes of Viktor Orban of Hungary, who has proposed the creation of a Hungarian Sovereign Protection Office to combat interfering outside forces, something his critics warn will be used against Orban's political opponents. Someone who can deal with Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders. Someone who can hold the EU together. No more damp rags and non-entities. Now, interestingly, the socialist in the form of Frans Timmermans came second in the Dutch elections with 26 seats. But his team was running a Project Fear campaign to try and stop Geert Wilders. And it looks like either that campaign failed or that it worked against those trying it on. Maybe the people have had enough of Project Fear and are seeing through the whole nudge unit attempted psychological control thing. Maybe that had something to do with this late rush of people deciding to plump for Wilders at the last hour. Who knows? But whatever the reason, the politics of the Netherlands has just been upended. And I would not be surprised to see this replicated across the rest of the EU in the coming months. Bear in mind that Marine Le Pen is gaining support in France and also stirred the pot by coming out against anti-Semitism, while the French left wing refuses to condemn Hamas for its actions. Not only that, Michel Barnier, who did his best to wreck the UK during the Brexit negotiations, now wants France to somehow ignore EU open borders rules and close France down to newcomers. Is he now admitting that Brexiteers were right all along? I remember his continually spouting that you're either fully in to get all the benefits of the single market or you're outside and get nout. But Barnier now wants a constitutional shield erected around France to stop the ever-increasing inward net migration. You can find nothing in the French constitution about migration, and there is almost nothing in the European treaties. For 30 or 40 years, there's a kind of interpretation that is always in favour of the migrants. We have to rewrite something in the EU treaties or in the European Convention of Human Rights, he said. Now I'll put it to you. Had these sorts of actions been taken within the EU before 2016, would the Brexit result have been the same? I would still have voted for leave, but how about you? But all this shows the direction of travel within the EU amongst the general population, but not among the political classes they've so far elected. But that now seems to be changing, at least at an EU member state level. But just like in the UK, every single member state has its share of obedient Europhiles at senior levels, probably even in Hungary. They were put there for the very purpose of ever closer union. But no one asked the people. But will Nexit be the next big thing?